Good evening. I want to call to order the April 25th meeting of the Salem Budget Committee. If the city recorder would please call the roll.
Mayor Peterson? Here. Member Bennett?
Here.
Member Tesler? Absent. Member Nanke?
Here.
Member Clausen?
Here.
Member Dickey?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Member Blasey?
Here.
Member Clem? Absent. Member Berger?
Here.
Member Kylowite?
Here.
Member Bailey?
Here barely.
Member George?
Here.
Member McEvely?
Here.
Member Strozit?
Here.
Member Motley?
Here.
Member Williams?
Here.
Member Pruitt?
Here.
Member Tesler is present as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Member Nanke, could you give me a motion on the minutes?
That's what I live for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we're so glad you do.
I would move approval of the minutes from the April 18, 2012 Budget Committee meeting. Second.
Second by Clausen. Are there any corrections, additions to the minutes? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Neville, correspondence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mayor and Budget Committee members. I'm Deborah Neville, the Budget Officer. This evening I'll be going over a couple of items with you early on in the agenda. The first one is in Section 4, correspondence. This week we have received a total of 10 letters or emails from citizens within the community. There are 3 addressing the cuts in the West Salem Library, opposing the cuts that are in the proposed budget. And there are 7 letters from individuals as well as neighborhood associations opposing the reduction of staffing for the neighborhood services program. And they are making some recommendations within their letters and correspondence. Any questions about correspondence received? I will move on to the handout material. We have several. Before we move on, I want to point out that there's most of the correspondence is contained in the additions agenda, which was left on your desktop this evening. Now I will move on to handout material, item 5A. Last week at the April 18th Budget Committee meeting, several questions came up that we were unable to answer immediately. However, we went back to our desks and prepared responses to those questions, and those are available for your information this evening. The next item is the summary of Budget Committee actions through April 18th, 2012. That's item 5B. This provides a recap of all of the actions that the Budget Committee has taken to date, including the one item that is on the wish list this year, any changes made to the budget, of which there was one, and the list, a growing list of correspondence. Everything received through last week is listed on this handout.
Are there any questions? Comments?
There are some more materials.
Oh, okay. I'm
to
sorry.
cover.
You
On
wanna
the
do them all
additions
at
agenda.
once? I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the additions agenda, we have 2 handout items. Item 5C is a memo from the city manager, Linda Norris, and she is talking about options for staffing the West Salem Library at 16 hours per week, which is a change from the proposed budget. You will see on this report there are 3 options available for your consideration. Then the last handout item is a errata sheet number 2. Was brought to our attention that one of the pages in the positions and analysis of positions and wages had incorrect numbers, and we had failed to shift the columns over by 1 year in our final appropriation of all tasks associated with the library budget. So we have attached page 319 to your handout. It will be updated on the internet page, and the columns have been shifted appropriately. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation. Any questions, I'd be happy to respond to.
I just want to comment on one question I asked. It was the final question that you answered regarding the bonds issued to offset PERS unfunded liability. The city was able, through that bond strategy, to save almost $3.4 million. I thought that was a good sign. I
Yes.
thought that was really excellent management. So. Member George.
Yeah, I was on these, I'm looking at, maybe this isn't the right time to bring it up. If it isn't, you can tell me to move on.
Okay.
But on the library thing, they said there's 3 options. Isn't there 4 options? Isn't one option to leave it the way Manager Norris originally
Yes.
had proposed it?
Yes, I presented 3 options if you want to change.
If you want to change it, okay. All right, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, great. Thank you. We're to goal setting and policy discussion. For this evening, we will be working from I'd like to, if you have any objections, let me know, working from main motions as we pass the budget, the city's overall 2012-13 budget, as well as the Urban Renewal Agency budget, and they will be changed by amendment. Note that your amendments then will come under item 9 if you want to make changes to the general fund budget in particular. Okay? Good. Any other? All right, we'll move on then to our public hearing on the City of Salem 2012-2013 budget. Right. First is Kevin Jowski.
Before I get started, if my voice appears a little bit hoarse, I do apologize in advance. I've been recovering from an upper respiratory infection. Okay. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council and Budget Committee, I appreciate having this opportunity to address our Budget Committee, City Councilors, and our Mayor. My name is Kevin Jowski, and I am a parking enforcement officer with the City of Salem. While working as a parking enforcement officer, I have seen firsthand the vital services that our city security officers provide in the downtown area. As one might expect, our downtown area has a lot of residents and visitors that come downtown to eat, shop, and enjoy our city. One of our city's goals is to revitalize downtown, which will undoubtedly have a positive impact on business. Our security staff is a vital link in order to accomplish this goal. Our security officers supplement the police department by acting as eyes and ears in the downtown area. Our security staff is able to respond efficiently and deal effectively with the transient population when the need arises. We have a number of transients in the downtown area who engage in nuisance activities. Security officers are a deterrent to nuisance activity, such as loitering and aggressive panhandling. They deter criminal activity in the parkades, such as car break-ins, thefts, and other crimes. They provide a vital presence in other areas of downtown Salem as well, especially in areas near the mall and the transit center. Last week, a young woman had had her cell phone stolen by a man at the transit center. She reported this to me, as well as my senior officer, while we were on Church Street collecting money from the parking meters. My senior officer contacted the police department, and I gathered additional information regarding the suspect's description. One of our security officers heard the call on the radio and was able to observe the suspect's location. This information was relayed to the police department, and they were able to find the suspect, and the cell phone was returned to the woman. Our security staff also functions as downtown ambassadors as they assist residents and visitors to our city with directions, parking information, and they provide other assistance as well. The security officers also supplement the parking enforcement officers by providing parking patrol in the parkade so that parking enforcement officers can focus on the on-street parking. Our security staff consists of 8 positions, 4 of which are temporarily filled with contract employees. With the proposed elimination of 7 full-time positions, this will have a negative impact on our downtown core area. Nuisance activities such as loitering and panhandling will most certainly increase. Car break-ins and thefts will increase as well. The security staff provides a vital service that helps protect the public, but will be unable to do so if these proposed cuts are carried out. We ask that the Budget Committee and each city councilor please consider the serious negative impact on business and public safety in the downtown area should these proposed cuts be carried out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, very much. Thank you for the work you do on the parking service. Does anyone have any questions for Kevin? Okay. False start there. Eric Bradfield. Eric, I failed to mention to Kevin, I will to you, that you have 3 minutes. Orange light means you have 1 minute. At the red light, I'll ask you to stop.
Okay, thank you. I'm Eric Bradfield with the Grant Neighborhood Association. One thing I'd like to remind everybody today that on the Grant logo and on on the city logo, it says at the bottom of it, at your service. And on the neighborhood logo, it says, get connected, get results. And so with the proposed cuts to the neighborhood services, can the city still say we're still at your service, get connected and get results? The neighborhood services coordinates, hundreds of volunteers across 19 associations. This comes out to tens of thousands of hours. Many of these hours are undocumented. Now, they also provide clear communication channels to the city. This helps prevent miscommunication. It prevents the citizens from saying, the city did this to us. It also fosters, we work together with the city to accomplish this. The neighborhood services group also helps us find contacts within the city, within the county, within the states, within chariots, other nonprofit organizations, and for-profits as well. So without the staff and without the liaisons, or with the reduced staff and liaisons, it'll be much more difficult to navigate the system. It'll take much more time to navigate it. Many of us may just give up trying if we don't have somebody to help us with that. And the main reason for that is many of us work 40, 50 hours a week. We volunteer with other services or other parts of the community. And then we're doing this on top of it. And there will be less communication with the city, which means less transparency. Transparency gives the appearance that the city is doing this to us and not giving us the opportunity to communicate. And we'd rather, be able to say we're working with the city on that, trying to accomplish this goal. And with less transparency comes less trust. And in Grant, we hardly ever hear, I don't trust the city. The city is doing this to us. We realize that we have a very strong voice and that we're heard. And the real question, so the question is why is this service being cut? I understand, the budget issues, but this is a really great, straightforward communication channel. Is it because it's easy? Is it because it's misunderstood? And just remember that this service, helps everybody, helps all the residents and citizens. And let's just go back to the slogan, at your service and get connected, get results. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Any questions for Eric? Eric is the co-chair of the Grant Neighborhood Association and does a great job.
Thank you.
They do a bang-up job.
Kara Kaiser.
Madam Mayor, City Councilors, Budget Committee members, thank you for having me speak tonight. My name is Kara Kaiser. I am a resident of Grant Neighborhood Association and also an active participant and board member of that association. And I oppose the cuts that are proposed for the budget to the Neighborhood Enhancement Program. Neighborhood Enhancement staff serve as critical connections between Salem's residents and its leaders. The work of the staff empowers neighborhood associations to get things done that the city doesn't have the resources to do. Their work has a multiplying effect. By my estimates, for every hour put in by neighborhood enhancement staff to provide services to neighborhood associations is matched by hundreds of hours put in by neighborhood volunteers. And this is why I strongly oppose these cuts. If the city loses this program, it will lose direct access to hundreds of citizens who have already bought into wanting Salem to be a better place. These are people you don't have to convince. These are people that need a better relationship with the city. They need to understand city processes, and they need access to knowledgeable city staff. So I have a suggestion for you that has floated around our listservs a bit between neighborhood associations. Take our communications budgets from neighborhood associations. We receive several $100s a year for all 19 neighborhood associations. Take that and swap it with our neighborhood services staff. The staff is so much more vital than postage to send out newsletters that we would rather take that cut than to lose people that are going to truly help us, and they're going to make our work easier and more meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you. Kara, does anyone have any questions? Great, thank you very much. And Patty Tipton.
I'm back. Madam Mayor and councilors and Budget Committee, my name is Patty Tipton, and I am the chair of Lansing Neighborhood Association. We had our annual meeting last night. We had a good number show up, and they were told what was happening down here, and they asked if I would read this letter to you. The city has expressed the importance of neighborhood associations many times. If they are so important, why are they eliminating the liaisons and half of the position that supports the neighborhood associations? These actions send a completely different message. Apparently, the city doesn't consider citizen input all that important. Where does that leave us? With no representation and no help to achieve the improvements we want to achieve. Just consider all the assistance that Howard has provided in terms of grant applications, pickup, park cleanup days, etc. These types of things would be very difficult without some sort of help from the city. The city is relying more and more on volunteers to do work employees once did. For example, our park maintenance. But now they are taking away positions that help support those efforts by volunteers. In this case, we of cutting off your nose to spite your face. Without support for these efforts, they won't get done, and how livable will our city be then? And we feel very strongly about this. So, any questions?
Thank you, Patty. Any questions for Patty?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the sign-up sheets. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Ninke, do you want to give us a motion on the Salem ad valorem property taxes?
Is that inside of the public hearing, or did we close the public hearing?
I don't know if I ever opened it. Public hearing's closed.
I heard you open it.
Did I? Okay.
And then I'm assuming that we'll actually then consider item 9 as deliberations?
Item 9 will come in order.
Okay.
This item 8.
Just, there was confusion as to if we would deliberate following the public hearing, since nothing actually says deliberation anywhere, just recommended.
I'm just following the agenda
Yeah.
here.
I would move that the Budget Committee approve the ad valorem property taxes as presented by staff.
Second.
Second by Clausen. Any discussion of the ad valorem property tax rate? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Let's have a motion then to move the budget. Chair moves the recommended fiscal year 2012-2013 City of Salem budget.
Second.
Second by Clem. Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
In light of that, with the Scrivener's error in regards to errata sheet number 2, we did not approve that, and that should be included then in the
Do you
budget
want
recommendation.
to add that in now?
So, yeah, I would go ahead and move errata sheet number 2 as an addition or amendment.
Second.
Second by Clausen. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, amendment passed. Councilor Clem? Do you have an
Mr.
amendment?
Chair, did we vote on the main motion?
Not yet.
For the budget?
We're going to amend the budget, and then we'll
Got it.
vote on it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the wish list item to maintain the West Salem Library open for 16 hours per week in accordance with option 3 as presented in the staff report into the 2012-2013 City of Salem budget.
Second.
Second by Tesler. Would you like to discuss your motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Budget Committee. This is a critical issue that we had talked about last week, and so rather than repeat comments that took quite a while last week, I want to just reiterate one item, and that is that we in the neighborhood have taken a look at where we can help the city budget with a cut that's reasonable. A 50% reduction, more than really, 50% reduction is more than reasonable to help us through this tough time. And this West Salem Library is important to all of the city of Salem, but I want to point out that option 3 proposes that, in fact, other public good that could happen in West Salem would help fund it. And so the net effect on the budget would be, for 2012-2013, would be 0. So it would be still in accordance with the overall amount that the city managers recommended, and would urge your enthusiastic support.
Councilor Dickey.
Thanks. I just have a question for staff. So this is one-time money, so this would only allow for the funding for this coming up fiscal year, and then next year we would be having to look elsewhere. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Member Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question of staff in that regard as well. I'm assuming we prioritize our streets based on need, and so this would be up in that line of paving that's required. Are we just never going to pave it now and let it fail, or is it still high on the list and we're going to pave it next year, so we're really not saving anything, we're just pushing something down the road?
Well, staff will evaluate again for the 13-14 year budget, and there may be other projects that have a higher need, or these might be there, but we haven't done that evaluation yet, so I can't tell you if these would come up in another year or 2 years. I don't have that
But we do know that
information.
these streets are in need of repaving to
Yes,
prolong their life.
they were on the list for next year, for 12-13.
Member Clausen.
A question as to the operation of the library based on the budget that we passed, or that we passed tonight. I'm assuming the budget doesn't mandate the operation one way or another of the library. Speaking to budget item number 1, something still could happen where hours could be shifted around, things like that. Am I understanding that correctly? We're not setting the operation.
The budget is our budget plan, and as we go into the year, as happened this year, if revenue decreases significantly or we have other issues, we might make adjustments during the year. Is that what you're asking?
I think I'm asking if we were, I mean, we're not telling them what the hours of the library are we? Or are we in effect doing it just because of the conversation that went into the budget?
This motion, I gave that information to you just for background, but this motion was to increase the staffing from the 6 hours that were in the proposed budget to 16 hours per week in the West Salem Library.
Okay, so
and so it'd be up to staff to decide which hours. And,
right.
Yeah.
So the budget we propose that is being voted on tonight would in effect mandate how the library operates. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
well, this proposed budget has no change to the main library operations or services and a reduction in hours to West Salem to 6 hours per week.
okay, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but we don't tell the city how to operate as a budget committee. We just approve money that goes to the library program, is what I'm saying.
Yes, that's right.
And then the library program chooses how to spend the money. And so this is kind of getting one step further down the chain. Am I right?
I understand what you're saying, but we've tried to always be very transparent at the service changes that we're making and that are proposed in this budget. And so as we presented that information, people in West Salem have testified that they'd like it to be increased to 16 hours per week. And so we've calculated how much money that is. It's about $37,000 some dollars. And the request was made to restore 10 additional hours. And so that's what we would do if this motion passes. We would staff the West Salem Library branch at 16 hours per week.
I understand.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yes. Okay.
And then I would just have to say, I completely appreciate the motion by Councilor Kime, but I can't support spending one-time dollars on a continued budget item, because what do we do next year? So it's a hard argument. I completely understand it and I respect it, but I can't support the motion at this point.
Member Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that same point, I'm a little concerned with, as a committee member, trying to vote on the operation of the library, which is what this really is, with all due respect to those that are concerned about the cuts. Just like I wouldn't feel comfortable advising the library staff on how many computers to buy this year, things like that. It seems to me that this is obviously an issue of concern to the public, which is why it was brought to our committee, but I'm a little concerned believing that I can intelligently vote on an operational issue. I don't have to vote on it, obviously, but an operational issue that rather than just vote on what's the budget for the general fund, that then budgets for the library.
Thank you. Mayor?
I think Diana's in front of me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diana.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a question for the maker of the motion. Councilor Clem, did the neighborhood association discuss or understand this proposal as far as removing the paving project and trade for increasing the library hours? Are you aware of the neighborhood association position on that, if they took one?
Go
that
ahead,
was for
Counselor.
To Councilor Dickey, the neighborhood association is well aware of the intent of shifting funds from paving, to the extent that some of the members have gone out and independently looked at the streets. And while obviously not engineering experts, it makes sense that if that happened within that one neighborhood, actually it's happening in two neighborhoods, Ward 8 and Ward 1. So, but within the West Salem Neighborhood Association, I don't know that they feel that they can comment on whether or not the road needs paving or not, but there's been a general acceptance through a number of emails and discussions, and it was discussed at the last Neighborhood Association meeting. So to exactly what, if they made a motion or anything like that, I'm not aware.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the motion. I won't be supporting this motion. I have a fundamental aversion to picking and choosing through the operations of the city in order to fulfill a wish on the wish list. I think that it's our job as the Budget Committee and Council to advise the city manager as to the budget, and it's up to her to see to the allocation of those hours that have been, and those funds that have been allocated for the library. I think that it's disingenuous of us to rob from a public works department or from streets or sidewalks or some other department in order to fulfill something on the wish list, where we have a library budget that can be adjusted at the discretion of the city manager. And that's where the adjustments, I think, should be made, if they were going to be made. I'm not in favor of those either, but speaking specifically to this motion, this would be a very slippery slope to start going down and weeding through this entire budget to pick and choose the dollars that we'd like to put to our special projects, to the detriment of the maintenance of the entire city for the benefit of all the people in the city.
Councillor Clem.
I appreciate the perspectives of folks who've spoken about us running the operation of the city. That I would agree with that. We have people in charge to run these things and make these decisions. We didn't vote in the main city budget on the entire library budget. We voted on hours at the main library and hours at the West Salem Library. That's what was presented to us. And so I would tell you that to other comments that have been made about us directing city operations, for those of us that are voting tonight, you are directing how many hours fire stations are going to be open, how many police officers. So I'm not asking the Budget Committee to vote on how many books are checked out or what hours they should be open. Those are operational decisions. But at the core of the way this budget is put together, it's put together by hours, and it's put together by location. The city manager put it together that way, and we're supposed to vote and react to that. So I don't know how we have these discussions and take public input if we can't at least even address the budget in the manner that it was submitted. And so while I appreciate that, we have a captain on the ship and our job is to provide resources, I think we're also going to have follow-on discussions here about other areas that folks would like to make adjustments to. And so I would implore that you not think about this steering the city manager. I would implore that you think about it, that we went through a public process, and the items that were most important to people they came down and testified on, and the budget was presented in hours and location. And so it just makes sense that the only way to react to it is by hours and location. If it were just presented as a number in accordance with an overall budget, which we just started discussing in January, then that would get to the point that you're saying we'd only be voting on the number. But we are voting, ladies and gentlemen, on hours and the way that city operates in 1,000 different ways. And so it's only this one area that has this kind of attention that I think we have no other choice but to vote by location and hours, because that's how it was presented to us.
Member Macville.
Ms. Norris, obviously somebody identified these streets need paved, right?
Obviously,
somebody in Public Works said these streets need paved, correct?
That's right.
And the chance of them getting any better on their own in the next year is probably
Zero.
pretty slim? Okay.
Yeah.
Unless it rains.
Right, and that's my point, is that, and one more question to you, that the last 3 years, you've had to make mid-season adjustments as conditions have continued to deteriorate, and you're anticipating that'll probably be the case this year and the next budget year? That you may have to continue to find additional cost savings?
That's likely.
Okay. So with that in mind, streets that need paved today being put off, I don't know that benefits anybody. These dollars are probably not going to be here in the budget for next year to maintain the hours next year. Would that be more than likely?
That is more than likely.
Okay. So I can't support this motion because I can't see putting off public works projects that need to be done today and are still going to be need to done at some time in the future and may worsen in the next year, to put an item back into the budget that almost certainly is going to be removed next year. So I think that's very would be a poor decision on this committee's part to take something out of a public works type project for a short-term fix to keep the library open a few extra hours. I'm sympathetic to the people in West Salem. I understand that. I'm a little more worried about the people that might be in Councilor Dickey's ward, okay, who it's easier for somebody in West Salem to come to this library than it might be from somebody in her ward to get to a library. Same to the woman sitting next to her. I worry more about the more economically disadvantaged people in the city of Salem who need the things that we have to offer, and as a rural West Salem doesn't really qualify under that. I think that for the people of West Salem to expect to have something, or the group that came down to expect to have something that's just not available to the rest of the residents of the city, including residents of the city that may need it far more, I can't justify taking good money that needs to be spent somewhere today and putting it into something that's going to have to be removed next year.
Member Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be supporting the motion. As a Budget Committee member, I've listened to public testimony and looked at the scope of this budget, and I can't believe that we're going to be really that the debate here is about filling a pothole for $40K versus keeping a library open for 16 hours a week. I mean, in a year and a half, nobody's going to remember that pothole got fixed. There's places all over the city that need it. I just think that in a budget of this size, the statement that this Budget Committee is making to the City Council and to the staff is that there is room in the City of Salem's budget to keep the West Salem Library open 16 hours a week, and that the discussion that's gone on is a suggestion of how that might be done. It might be done another way when it really gets down to it. But I think that there is room in the City of Salem's budget to support 16 hours a week in a library facility that is clearly heavily used, and I regret that there isn't a comparable facility in other neighborhoods in the city. That's a goal that I think we ought to shoot for. But I don't think that we need to be closing it, and next year can take care of itself. I believe that next year people are going to be as concerned, and so I'm making the decision about this year's budget. And I do appreciate we're trying to get on a glide path to sustainability here, but I do think, given the size of the general fund budget, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Motley.
Thank you. I can't support the motion as it is. Frankly, when I read through the documentation, I felt that the obvious answer was option one, to remove some hours from the main library and put them on the West Salem Library side. That leaves all the money in the libraries, it leaves all the hours in the libraries, it leaves all the books in the hands of the people. I'm really loath to take asphalt and put it in a library. You know, as I talk to people, I say, what's the most important thing? We went out and heard what all the people said in 4 separate meetings around town. I think we prevalently heard that there are, you know, like 4 things always seem to come out on top, and one of them, 2 of them are libraries and streets, roads, and I hate to see them compete with one another in that respect. If the motion maker were to amend that to select option 1, or if there were a substitute motion, I would jump on it with bared teeth. I think that's far and away the best solution here. I might also say that leaves, I concur that the manager has the latitude and the authority to move money around within our appropriations and allocations. I see option 1 as simply giving the manager guidance that rather than a big number here and a little number here, or a little bigger number here and a little smaller number here, I see it as guidance, not a demand, and it doesn't rob, in my opinion, does not rob one fund or one entity for another. I've never been in the West Salem Library. I may never go until it becomes the big library. But for right now, I also see this as a sustainability issue. I think if we look at ratios of hours and time and money, perhaps in the ensuing years until it becomes no longer feasible, that option one might provide the manager and, if as appropriate, future managers on that there's a ratio that the city needs to maintain. You know, we always want 93% of the available money here and 7% here, or however that all works out. I haven't done the math. But I see it as keeping the money in one place, giving the manager direction, addressing the future issues in terms of sustainability for West Salem.
Thank you.
Sorry it took so long. Thank you.
No, no, that's fine. Thank you. Member Berger.
I agree with Member Motley. I'm not going to be supporting this motion. I would, if the road doesn't need to happen, I'd support a motion to get rid of that and move it to next year and save that money, you know, put more in contingency if we're going in that direction. And I don't like the idea of hiring staff or keeping on staff for one more year just to cut them. I do support option one because I believe if we're going to have this asset in West Salem, whether we want another one in another community, another part of the community or not, I think we should use that asset to a reasonable number. And I think if you see all the people who use that, I think it really is an asset. A few hours here, I think is worth it. So I would support option one, but I will not be supporting the current motion.
Member Blaze.
Thank you. I enthusiastically support your amendment, and that is based on the fact that I think that keeping in mind that this is a public budget process, and this is the city's budget, and it's the citizens, and the one issue that we have heard repeatedly in the last few weeks is please keep the library open. And so I will be supporting that. And whether it's from option one or option three, I think it's important to respect what we've heard from the people who pay the taxes and fund all of these services. They've asked us to keep the library open, so I'll support that.
I want to comment on it as well. My ward is affected by this either way you vote. If you close our library in West Salem, you close it, because 6 hours is closure. I mean, I think we ought to be honest with ourselves. And if you don't pave that street, it's a street in my ward. And I'm asking you to join in Councilor Clem's motion, amendment. I think he's made a good point. I want to kind of put it, though, in a little bit of context. We have 136,000 repairs needed on our streets and sidewalks in Salem. 136,000. And we're going to sit here and debate over an alligator street, one alligator street that has been put up by the city manager for a possible funding source for this. This is not public works money. I think that's one of the things that bothers me most about the discussion is this is money from the general fund that is currently, through a policy of this group, over the objections of a city manager in the past, has been moved to the streets. This isn't money that this is general fund money. This is money for parks, for libraries, for street lights, for police. I continue to be amazed we're hearing nothing about the cuts in police. Nobody's being laid off. There's no layoffs going on here either way. That's not what the manager proposed. So what's proposed here is a request from a neighborhood to keep its library open for one more year, because you know what? This is this year's budget. Next year, we're going to go through this all over again, and we're going to make these difficult choices. So yeah, I think to vote for next year at this point on small items like this, and to mix up Public Works General Fund, I think it's part of it is the history of how this money comes about, but this is a perfectly reasonable request. It is a use you're going to be confronted, I think, next year. I'll take it to next year to move $500,000 from these street projects back to the general fund like it used to be. because none of this money was spent on these kinds of projects. Public Works has got money for streets. We don't have money for libraries, and that's what this is about. And I guess the thing that I hope you'll support this. 10 of you did when this went on the wish list. This is correct public policy. Certainly voting no is correct public policy. But this is the right way to go if you think libraries and those kind of services ought to be funded with general fund dollars. If you think streets ought to be funded with general fund dollars, you got a debate coming in the future. You've already moved money around that way anyway. You've already broken that dam in other votes you've done. So we're down the road on this thing, and I think we ought to respond to the people in West Salem and keep their library open. We've got more serious fish to fry. And again, I continue to marvel that this is what's got us spun. Member Machiavelli mentioned it a couple of meetings ago. We're laying off, we're going through the loss of police, loss of fire, and all this, and we're wrapped around the wheel on this library. I think this is frankly, a simple vote that ought to be positive. I really encourage you to vote yes. Mayor?
Well, I'd like to say I'm absolutely shocked and dismayed to find out tonight that we possibly have, how much did you say, Councilor Bennett?
136,000 street and sidewalk repairs. Is that?
Right, but that we have how much money in that we've moved into the general fund, that could be moved into the general fund from streets maintenance?
Well, we do the water and sewer franchise fee. In previous years, last year, we transferred $1 million over to transportation. In the proposed budget, we're moving only $500,000 over. And I think what Chair Bennett was suggesting is that next year, in the 13-14 budget, there may not be any of the water sewer franchise fee money that goes into transportation because we'll need it for general fund services.
But did I understand you to say that the money that would be moved to the West Salem Library funding comes out of street repair money?
It would be, you'll see under option 3, the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Is the way this works is we would be using water sewer franchise fee money that's transferred to transportation for some of these maintenance projects. So if we don't want to do those maintenance projects and we want to keep the money in the general fund, we would keep that $70,000 in the general fund and not transfer it over to for transportation projects.
And how much money is in the general fund for those that came from the transportation fund that's in the general fund?
Well, it's the other way. It's we are moving $500,000 from the general fund to transportation. So this would move only $430,000 from the general fund to transportation. Does that make sense?
Well, I may be confused, but I want to make a point. I think this is the wrong time to suddenly be able to know that there is a pot of money that we should have been looking at for public safety. We're reducing firefighters, we're reducing police officer positions, and now you're telling me that there's money that we could have not put in the budget for street repair, and we could have had it for those police officer positions and those firefighter positions?
Well, we've been talking about that since January, or since last fall.
Right.
That before the city council and the budget committee, I think, had asked under the Safer Streets process to move an increasing amount of water and sewer franchise fee money into transportation for street maintenance because there wasn't enough money for street maintenance either. And that used to be $1.5 million a year ago. I think we cut it to $1.2 million. In the 11-12 budget, it was cut to $1 million. In the 12-13 budget, it's cut to $500,000. So that's the amount of money you're referring to.
Right.
So we've been over time decreasing the amount that goes into transportation, and it'll be, I'm likely to recommend that there not be any transferred over next year.
Well, I just want to go on record to say to the public, to this budget committee, to the staff and the employees, I'm just shocked to find out at this point that we could have been going through that budget and picking out money that we would have wanted for police positions and fire positions, and we wouldn't be in the tenuous situation that we're in right now in this city had we known that we could have moved that money.
And Mayor, it's in the budget message, and it's been part of the communication the full time. I'm sorry that that didn't come across, but it's been discussed.
With all due respect, we've been working together on this budget since last October.
That's right.
And you have never made it sound as though there was money that could possibly be shifted away from the way the budget is put together by you and by staff. And so I'm just saying there's a credibility issue here right now with me tonight. Because if we could have gone through this budget and picked and choose, and to pick and choose, you know that I'd be picking and choosing for public safety. And I'm just thinking there's something badly wrong with the way we're doing this tonight.
Member Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that subject, I know Councilor Clem sat on the Save Our Streets subcommittee of council. We actually had recommended that the water sewer franchise fee money be slowly moved over to full general fund versus designating a portion of it for transportation. So it's not like the water sewer franchise fees are anything different than all the other revenues that come in to the general fund. It's just we chose to use a specific portion of them because of the nexus of water sewer franchise with street repair. And over the years, it's moved back and forth between full general fund uses and transportation uses. I was of the mindset it should go to all transportation uses, which is why we made said recommendation, because without that, there's no nexus. And I have issues just with water sewer franchise fee in general, because we're charging people who own that system a franchise fee on it after they've already paid for it with their property taxes over the years. So I'm a firm believer it should go to the streets. We're not really shifting one thing or the other. If the street has to be fixed, it has to be fixed. Have we actually designated said street that won't be paved and asked the people who dwell upon it whether or not they want their street done or they want the library?
Mr. Bechtel can talk about the streets that are available in West Salem, or the ones that we're talking about. But no, we have not. This just came up 2 weeks ago, as you know, in the Budget Committee meeting. And no, we have not talked to people. The city has not talked to people in those streets about this project.
Mark Bechtel, Parks and Transportation Services Manager. The 3 streets that would be proposed to not be paved this coming summer to meet Councilor Clem's motion is Hidden Valley Drive Northwest, the portion from Glen Echo Court to Glen Eden Court. The cost of that curb-to-curb paving, about 2-inch overlay project, is $36,000. The next street is Cascade Drive Northwest from Arrow Court to Jefferson Court. Cost of that project is $14,000. Again, curb-to-curb paving, 2-inch overlay. The third street is Jasper Way Northwest from Claremont Street to its western terminus. Cost of that project is $10,000. Again, full overlay, curb-to-curb.
A follow-up?
Yes.
So those streets are alligator to the point, as we saw other streets, and are in need of repair. Do you see them being surpassed by some other project, or when would we actually pave them then, if it were up to you?
Councilor, every year around November, we do a complete assessment of all of our street pavement conditions based on the data that we gather. And then we look at it again after the winter is over and what the winter weather and rains have done to those streets. And then we come up with a final paving list. We then allocate our money accordingly. Every street that's on that paving list, given the backlog we have and the condition of these are all local streets, local street pavements, every street on that list needs to be paved. The question as to whether it be paved next year depends on a number of things. Depends how bad the streets deteriorate generally, collectively in the city over this next year, what kind of winter we have, what kind of rains we have, and what our paving budget is for next year.
if I can just follow on with the end of my thought in that respect. Yeah, we can move funds around, whatever. We could take the last 500,000 that was supposed to go to transportation this year and just shove it all over into something else, police, fire, and that's all what's gotten us into the situation we are with our deferred maintenance now. It's never sexy to fix a water pipe, overlay a street, as compared to those things that people are out there seeing all the time, and that's why it's sad that John Elligan isn't here anymore, so he can whip out his wall of shame on the stuff that we let go, that goes to the point of failure, that we knew was there, and just didn't have the resources to fix. The street still needs to be fixed. When do we spend the money on it? It's good. Do we just push all of them down the road and keep doing that every year? We have $3.5 million next year. Where's that coming from? The year after, we don't even know where that's coming from. Every little bit we don't do something with is contributing to the problem in our out years.
I'll just remind you that the wall of shame would still be the wall of shame under the motion. That's not affected by this. In fact, we'd need to get the money into the general fund to fix the stuff behind the wall of shame. This is a different, that's really what got hurt, was that kind of deferred maintenance in the decision to put it on streets. Councilor Clem.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bechtel, just a question if I could. Two of the streets that you mentioned are what classification are they? And I mean, if we're going to talk about streets here, I just want to make sure we understand. These are local or collector, dead end, cul-de-sac?
Two of the streets are local residential streets. Cascade Drive is actually a collector street.
Right, for part of it. And then two of the streets are cul-de-sac or dead end.
Jasper Way is a cul-de-sac, yes.
Right, and Hidden Valley ends, it has its western terminus, the part you're talking about paving.
Yes, way in the county though, yes. Yeah.
Right, they're dead end streets, cul-de-sac. And how long have they been on the list, Mark?
Several years.
Yeah, and if the intent of my motion is to delay it 1 year, and then, you know what, next year's budget will be next year's budget. I can't call this one-time money because gas tax receipts, as they come in varying amounts every year, they're just as variable as property taxes are, which is really the source of the problem we have here. So my motion is not intended to create an argument about streets versus libraries or these streets versus, how many streets do we have total that need repaired? You mentioned 136,000 projects, but how many streets are on the repair list?
Well, first of all, the 136,000 repairs refers to sidewalk repairs, just in the sidewalk system.
Oh,
just sidewalks.
Sorry.
So that's
same pot of
sidewalks.
money, but how many streets?
Street repairs, how many streets are on our list? Hundreds of street segments need to be maintained to one form or another.
And that is really the challenge with putting this budget together. We have responsibilities with public safety, we have responsibilities with street maintenance, we have responsibilities with fire service, we have responsibilities with managing our finances. And so through council's direction and the budget committee's recommendations, we've tried to make sure that we're doing at least an adequate job in all areas. As we work hard over these last few years to have to cut a lot of things that are important to lots of people in the community, it is that juggling of what's more important now than other things. And street maintenance was, for the first year I recommended reducing the water sewer franchise fee transfer to keep more of it in the general fund. I think it was rejected at that point, but over time, as we've had to make more cuts and more cuts in the general fund, I think there's come to be a better understanding that we're going to have to keep balancing those. And as I've talked about several times before, because we have now the state highway tax revenue is a little higher than it had been before, that I felt more comfortable moving more of it out of transportation, although it still has an impact there. There is a definite impact if we don't do street maintenance, as there's a definite impact if we have to reduce firefighters or do, police officers or other things. As we continue to have to make even more and more difficult situations, because as Councilor Member Nanke has said, think about having to cut another 40 positions next year and where those come from with so few people left in the general fund. We have to then rebalance, okay, how much is street maintenance, how much is public safety, how much is parks? That's part of what this entire process is about, and I understand that it gets more difficult as we go.
Member Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I appreciated the 136,000 number. I'm just going to keep it because it's a number. I mean, really what this means is, and I appreciate Councilor Clem's comment, but who this ends up hurting is next year when these projects are now number 1 on the list, number 2 on the list, and number 3 on the list because they don't go away and all the other projects around them in importance go away. What that does is next year 3 more projects go to the following year. 3 more projects from there go to the year following. 3 more projects from there go to the year following. I'm extremely concerned about our capital needs in the city. When we got to this budget transfer during the budget session, when we talked about this, I asked about it because I was concerned about going from $1 million going from street maintenance to $500,000. But then I started that next week. I was going to make a proposal. We put it back, and then I had the same concerns the mayor mentioned, which is, oh my gosh, where do we take it out of general fund though? And I'll tell you, it's a tough choice. In my opinion, this choice is, I think we need to keep our streets full, and we need to keep our streets drivable. And I realize they're neighborhood streets. We have neighborhood streets in South Salem that are further down on the list, and I would like to see those put in then. I mean, same with Central Salem, same with other areas. It's a tough choice. This is just indicative of what we're going to be talking about in the future. And, you know, what's right, what's wrong, my personal feel is we need to keep our streets on this one, so that's where I'm at still.
Member Mackerel.
Well, 2 things, because Councilor Clem mentioned gas tax revenue. Oddly enough, I happen to be in that business. I can tell you that the first quarter of this year, gasoline demand in Oregon was down very close to 10% over last year. That's a trend that's obviously continued well into April. I can pretty much assure you that your gas tax revenues will probably fall short of any expectations you have for this year. Demand, not only in the Northwest Oregon, demand is down nationwide. Nobody sees anything that's going to counter that. So you're going to have a bigger hole to fill next year. The other thing that I think we're forgetting is we're not closing a library. We're talking about closing a branch of a library. I parked next to this big building tonight that looked to me like a library. And I think the library, concentrate the resources into the library that we have, make the library that we have the best that we can make it. And it's not like we're suddenly shutting the citizens of Salem out of a library. We have a library.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You all know Councilor Clem's motion. You're familiar with it at this point? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
I believe it's 9.
All opposed?
Nine.
That would make sense mathematically.
You're okay? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Tied, motion fails.
I move,
Yes, Councilor.
I move that the West Salem Library be funded at 16 hours per week per the recommendations made by the city manager as option number 1 in the staff report.
I second the motion.
Motion second by Blasey. Discussion. Yes.
Obviously, recommending option 1 was not my top choice, but I honestly believe that it is an entire library system. And I would not want to see one main branch versus a branch, a main library versus a branch. And so that's why I struggled with option number 1. It's all the library. The books all move. It's the same people. It's the same books. And while I regret that we should do anything to either library, it seems that option 1 just may be a fairer approach to it, given that the earlier motion failed. But I really believe that we need to continue to support our entire library system, and that includes its branch. And if option one is something certainly that City Manager Norris feels is an option for us, and it doesn't get into other parts of the budget, I really believe that we need to keep our entire library system viable. You can get into discussions, and we've seen emails about the difference in costs and how you calculate the efficiencies of it. Some of those may be accurate, some of them not. But I really honestly believe that it isn't necessarily all about efficiencies. It's really about our library system. Keeping a viable branch with the main library is an important consideration, and so I would ask your support for option number one.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Clausen?
While I'm not opposed to central tenet of this is a far different discussion than has ever been held on council floor or on the budget committee's floor. I would be up for a conversation about this later on, but not here as a budget committee. One, for two reasons. One, we're not changing any dollars, and that's the budget committee's only purview. Two, is that there's an entirely different population that's involved in this conversation than was involved in the last one we just had. And I think we would hear a totally different set of people who come out of the woodworks to hear that portion of the conversation. And that would almost is worth a public hearing to me. So I'm going to vote no on this. I'm going to recommend that if we want to do something with it, I'd be happy to have the conversation as a council direction since it's an operative piece, and I'd like to get public testimony on this.
Okay. Councillor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the way this came to us is because there were cuts that need to be made. The city manager, being diligent in that respect, identified a reduction in library funding and gave the specifics of how that was to be targeted. And that was essentially to keep the West Salem Library from defaulting, essentially letting it go back to the property owner, which would happen if we closed it all the way. This keeps it on low-level life support so that we can have the discussion actually of do we want to stick two other branches out there, change the library into a police station, spend some money for seismic upgrades, go out for an operating levy potentially for the excess to help the general fund. There's a lot of discussions that can be had. This does actually get into the point of telling the city manager how to run the city, only because she gave us this is how the cut will be implemented. And I think that we could say that it has no weight on her whatsoever. It says this is the library budget. She can close it down all the way next week. If I don't like it as an option even. But we identified for the people in Salem what that cut would actually manifest as.
Okay.
Icky.
Member Dickey?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment, but just piggybacking on what Councillor Clausen said, I had the same thought. I mean, this seems like a reasonable, could be a reasonable solution, but I am concerned about the people that might frequent the library on Thursday evenings and just allowing them to have an opportunity to speak. So I guess my question/comment is, should this go forward tonight, they would have an opportunity to testify at the budget public hearing, is that correct, on
That's
this
correct.
change? Okay.
Just also remind you, you could hold this over to a council action. I mean, the council gets a final cut on this, and you could pull this forward as part of the council action around the budget if you'd like to have more time on this and maybe recommend something forward to the council from the budget committee that they take a look at the issue of additional hours at West Salem Library and clear the floor of this issue. You make that motion if you want. It's pretty, Clausen got very close.
I would make a substitute motion that, I don't know how I structured that.
I think
Chair.
you would move to
We
that the
table
budget
this and
committee-
make a
well, that
recommendation to
The budget
council.
committee recommend that the city council review library hours at the West Salem branch as part of its deliberation.
Yeah, that'd be, my motion would be that, a substitute motion is that Budget Committee make a recommendation to council to review the hours distributed between the main library and West Salem at a later date.
I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Member Motley.
Since the Budget Committee isn't the, thank you. Since the Budget Committee is not the final say, the final authority or whatever on the budget, seems to me the council has the capacity to discuss the budget, whether the current motion passes or not. Also, the motion that's in abeyance. I see the current motion as superfluous here. I would hope that we would just simply, that the Budget Committee would either act on the obeyed motion or not. We either pass it or fail it and let the council do with it what they wish, because they have that capacity anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Clem.
I want to honor the Citizens Budget Committee, the involvement. And if we need to stay till 10 o'clock, not necessarily on one item, but the entire Budget Committee. I appreciate Councillor Clausen's comments, and yes, it's inevitable, but I like to think this is where the budget is done, and that you folks and all the work that's gone into it has got to be honored. And so, win or lose, it was the 18 of us that did it, and I cannot lose sight of that. We want citizens involved. We want people to know what we're considering and comment on it. I wish we could have public hearings galore on how to reestablish each department, but I got to tell you, that's where I agree with you. We don't get into all of that stuff. We're talking about hours for the library system and making a slight tweak to that. And so I would not support the substitute motion, because this is not City Council. You are not overridden by City Council. It is the Citizens Budget Committee, and in almost every budget that I voted on, except for one, this was where we decided the budget, and that's where I'd like it to stay.
Member Berger.
Yeah, I really dislike this motion. I would think the City Council would like to hear what we have to say, and then in future hearings, if they hear public comment and they disagree with us, they still have that power. But I don't see why you wouldn't want to hear what we have to say on this issue before you move forward, and that's literally what it's doing, is taking, I mean, you won't even know what our opinion is on this, and in the future, you guys can change it as you see fit.
Member Clausen.
I think maybe I wasn't clear on my motion here, but the motion is, does the Budget Committee want to make a recommendation to council to address this, to put more hours into West Salem? And I would think the citizen members would agree with me that the public, the general library using public, has not had a chance to see this proposal. And they haven't had a chance to come down here and talk to you guys as citizens. If all of the Budget Committee wants to come down and do public testimony at the same time, that's a great time. The recommendation is to look at this at a later date, and it's not about trying to gloss over the Budget Committee or the citizen members of the committee. It's about trying to do this in due process, where everybody's voices are heard that has a stake in what the library has. And, you know, it's a big deal. Closing a Thursday night, it's a big deal. I'll tell you what, my wife and my kids use the downtown one and not the West Salem one, so they haven't been interested in this conversation to date. But they might be real interested when they hear that this downtown one is going to be closed down in the evening. So that's the point. It's just trying to get the recommendation forward if the Budget Committee wants to do it. I think regardless, it's going to come up at council. It's just, what does the Budget Committee feel?
Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not in support of the motion to delay the decision. I think that we owe it to ourselves and our community to include the entire Budget Committee in this vote. And to do anything less is disregarding the volunteers that have faithfully been with us on this Budget Committee since last November. And I'd very much like to have a vote including all of the Budget Committee. Of course, there'll be time for further discussion, as there always is when this is considered by the council for final adoption. But I think that tonight we need to have this vote with all of us. Thanks.
Member Strozek.
The current hours of the West Salem Library were voted on by the Budget Committee. The closure on Monday at the main library was voted on by the Budget Committee, and charging a fee for DVDs and multimedia material was voted on by the Budget Committee. So I don't think that the Budget Committee weighing in on this for the council to later affirm or amend is a departure at all.
Member McAviley.
Well, I mean, almost 2 years ago to the night, on the first vote, the budget got voted down. Kind of an arm was twisted during a recess to get the budget passed. Once it got to council, it didn't even resemble the budget that came out of the Budget Committee. So I'd like to remind everyone of that. So I think we may as well have our voice heard tonight, and I won't support the substitute motion. I think if you're going to change it, you're going to change it, but you may as well have on record how the committee voted, so I can't support the substitute motion.
Member Nanki.
Yeah, and actually, just in thinking about, we're recommending a budget to the city council tonight. So we're already just making a recommendation, which I think gets back to Mr. McEvely's statement as well. And then at council, we could actually, next week, call for something in regards to a public hearing on operational levels for the library. We know that there'd be a ton of West Salem people show up. So it's hard to get a feel for the public in general, but essentially tonight we are making a recommendation. And it'd be interesting to see what that recommendation is, because the council will pick it up anyway.
Member George.
I may just be missing something here, but isn't the library system managed by somebody, an individual or somebody that oversees the whole thing, like the city, the main library and the West Salem Library? And it would seem to me that that should fall in their realm to manage the thing. To, if we have a shortfall in money, if we have to shift some people from one place to the other, you know, let them do it. You know, I mean, if it's like we're going to close one of them, obviously that's something that maybe should be more involved. But the fact that if we just take like option one, is just saying, you know, I don't know, maybe this went to somebody at the library to get concurrence on it, I'm guessing probably, and they're agreeable to it. So I don't know how I don't know how to run a library. So, I mean, to me, that just seems like that's all within one thing. I didn't like the idea of taking the street thing and pushing that, kicking that down the road. You know, I like it if it's within the system, let the system manage the system. So that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Thank you. Member Clem.
And we're voting on the substitute motion whether to recommend further to the council. So I would just call for the question.
Is everyone done? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to punt, how would you describe it?
Have the Budget Committee make a recommendation to council to address the hours at a later date.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails. Okay, we're back to the main motion for an amendment. I will remind you, we did hear from representatives of the library, Friends of the Library, I forget the other groups.
Library Foundation.
They opposed this approach. If you'll recall, I think if you look back, there was real concern about going into the broader library services and moving it around this way. I just remind you of that. Member Clausen?
I just wanted to give a shout out to Member Stroza. I appreciated your testimony about what's happened in the past. Having that history makes a lot of sense, and I appreciated that, which is what changed my opinion on it. And I see Councilor Dickey nodding her head too. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there on the table.
Thank you. Member Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm not real fond of this particular option, although I really do. I think the sense of it underneath is what Member George just said, is that if we're talking about a system here, there ought to be a way within it to balance the needs given both the desire of the council, the wishes of the Budget Committee and the concerns of the citizens to try to get the best possible balance in there. My particular interest is, I do believe that there has to be a way, an option within the budget framework, whether it's within the library box itself or within the larger general fund box, to fund staffing of the West Salem branch for 16 hours a week. I can't believe that there's not an option in there. This may not be the option. It happens to be the option of the motion that we're voting on. So if this motion goes down, I would be prepared to offer a motion that is more general, but directive of perhaps more of a sense of the Budget Committee to try to achieve 16 hours in some way without specifying the option. That would give you, the council, and the mayor a target to shoot from in your particular discussions when you go down the road that Councilor Clausen talked about. So I just want to say that I'd be prepared to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clem.
Yeah, I'm sorry, almost. It's not my preferred option either, but I honestly believe that we ought to look at balancing the libraries. This Citizen Budget Committee is supposed to adjust the budget as presented. That's the role that we have. Other than that, we're a rubber stamp committee. And so I really honestly believe that there hasn't been a budget that we haven't made a slight tweak to. And if it speaks to balancing out the needs of all of the community, I think that's what we're here for. And so I would encourage that you pass option 1. And then there will be public hearings at the city council level, and the balance of that process can occur, as has been stated by other members.
Any further discussion? Member Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I regret that I didn't speak up concerning option 3 because I thought it was a fine option. I like that the folks in West Salem were willing to make a sacrifice in their own part of town. They said, here, this is more important to us than that. And I like the attitude behind it, and I like the spirit behind it. And I don't know if that's my place to say, no, you can't have it. If they say, we want to give this up because we want that over there way more than we want this, then who are we to say no? So I regret that I didn't speak up because now it failed. I'll support option 1, but it's not my first choice.
Thank you. Member Tessler, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay, Member Nank.
Just to follow up on Member Bailey's point, we can find money. It's what don't we do and what do we push down the road? That's essentially what the city manager has evaluated with all the managers and all the directors for all the departments, and they've made a recommendation on what they think they can live with. This recommendation was to take the West Salem Library down as far as it can possibly go. We're looking at now cutting into the main library's hours. The public will only, I actually voted to start it back up on Mondays the next year, shut it back down. Awful decision, wasted money. 2 years ago, this committee elected to add 10 people above the city manager's recommendation back in the budget. That has cost us $2 million in the last 2 years, which would go a heck of a long way to dealing with this year's budget shortfalls. It's pushing it down the road, and that's what people have to realize. It's like, you may not be here 2 years from now. Somebody's going to have to sit here and pony up for the decisions we make tonight down the road. So, what it comes down to.
Well, I like to believe those 10 people did service to the public of Salem as well. Okay.
Yeah. But at what cost?
$2 million.
$2 million. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. What you got?
12.
12. All opposed? Okay, all done? Motion passes. All right. Member Tessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take this time to make my motion. I move that the staffing levels in the Community Development Department and the Neighborhood Enhancement Division be increased from 13 full-time equivalents to 13.5 full-time equivalents, and the division budget be increased by $12,600 to be paid for by, 1, reducing a combination of conference and tourism promotion and/or major tourist attraction and cultural facility grants by $12,600 through recommendations to be made by the TOT Advisory Board. 2, increasing the TOT allocation to historic and city landscape maintenance by $12,600. And 3, reducing the general fund to parks maintenance by $12,600.
Second.
Thank you. My discussion basically centers around the fact that this motion restores the existing level of staff support to neighborhood associations. We've heard a lot of testimony about that, and I think this achieves that goal. Funding for that restoration of these positions from 1 to 1.5 full-time equivalent, or FTE, is derived from 2 sources. The first source of funding is already in the Neighborhood Enhancement Division budget in the form of communication dollars directly granted to neighborhood associations in the amount of $24,880. We did hear some testimony tonight relating to the encouragement of use of these funds for the specific matter. This funding will be reallocated to personal services. The second source of funding comes from increasing the TOD allocation to parks by $12,600. The total amount necessary to restore the 0.5 or half of a full-time equivalent is $37,480.
Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, and I think it wasn't clear in the motion that we were asked to put together for Member Tesler. In the first one of reducing a combination of conference and tourism promotion, and then categories within the top budget, the advisory board can make recommendations on the categories in the top budget, but it's this group that needs to decide about culture and promotion, if you want any of it to come from there or not. Okay.
Okay. Member Clem.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the total amount that the budget is being increased by is, the written motion that I have here says $12,600. Is it actually 37,000 a combination?
The difference would be in moving the money that's already in neighborhood enhancement budget for communications, just moving that to personal services.
Okay, so
the
it was,
additional amount.
it is accurate in terms of the dollar amount.
That's
And then what you're recommending, City Manager Norris, is that in number 1, we would strike through recommendations to be made by the TOD Advisory Board. Is that what you're saying that we need to change?
The board would decide how to reduce major tourist attraction and cultural facilities, but if this body wants some of this $12,600 to come from the conference and tourism promotion budget for Travel Salem, you would need to decide that.
Okay.
I'm sorry
then
that these decisions get so
The motion is written
complicated.
is accurate then? Okay, that's what I was double checking.
Yes, imagine that.
Any further discussion? Member Motley.
Thank you once more. As a note of edification, statement, this funding will be reallocated to the personal services, stated as a fact. Can I ask, how do we know this? Has this already been agreed upon, discussed, whatever?
So to add the additional half-time FTE, some of it needs to go into salaries, Social Security line items, all of those line items related to half of a position instead of in materials and services.
Yes, I understand that. I'm just saying how this is not the way the budget is currently written. So how do we know that the funding that's not in personal services will go to personal services? Has this been prearranged with you?
Because you will direct us to do that, and we will do that.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I'd like to say I think this is a great motion. I will completely, fully, and totally support it. And I thank Councilor Tesler for coming up with this mechanism.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dickey.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to be supporting this motion. As we heard testimony over the last couple weeks from neighborhoods concerned about losing their support, I also was attending neighborhood association meetings and seeing the neighborhoods say, we have communication money we have to spend in the next 2 months, and we don't know what to do with it. And it seemed to me like that might be an opportunity to say, this is all in the same budget. Is that some way we could restore the services they want? And I started talking with some of the neighborhood board members and leaders, and I was a little concerned that they might say, don't take our communication money away, but actually what I heard was, if we have to trade communication money for getting that staff support, we want the staff support. So I will be supporting this, but as we've talked about tonight, will this be in next year's budget? Maybe not, likely not in next year's budget. So, I hope the neighborhoods are kind of keeping that, in the back of their heads and thinking about ways they might be able to do things differently if we have to make that difficult choice next year.
Member Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification on the actual communications funds and what all they're used for. Is that the discretionary communications dollars as well as every newsletter and monthly mailing?
Ms. Woods is here to address that.
Vicki Harden-Woods, Community Development Director, your Community Development Director. The communication money has been, if this motion is approved, there will be no communication money left in the budget. And what happened, the proposed budget that you have before you already cut the communication money about in half, a little bit more than in half. And that cut out the printing of agendas and the mailing and all of that. So that's already off the table for the next year. What this removes is the money that went directly to the neighborhoods to be spent for specific communication items that they would choose.
Okay, thank you. If I may?
Yes.
SPIF grants are still in the current budget?
They are.
I would make a substitute motion that monies from the SPIF grant be used in place of the TOT dollars.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
For discussion.
Mayor seconds.
And basically the reasoning is, we had a lot of people talking to us on TOT dollars. Again, they haven't had any opportunity. The SPIF grant dollars all go through the neighborhood associations as well. Albeit it does leverage funds, so do TOT dollars, so do social service dollars. I think that's more directly related to neighborhood associations and what they're doing than the TOT dollar, which is going to be our new pool to go after when we want to divert any money into the general fund, and that's kind of dangerous as well. I mean, we're already looking at that to just keep our parks alive, and now we're looking at it to fund bodies by moving some into parks from it and then stealing it off on the side, which kind of irks.
A little harsh there. Stealing might be a little.
Stealing.
Berger.
Yeah, how much SPIF dollars, since this is now
It's
new?
$60,000, and it's in the non-departmental section of the budget. And
Do you have a
that's
page
used-
number for me?
Yes, let me get that for you. You'll find it on page 93, the last item, Salem Park Improvement.
Okay. And typically, what is this used for?
And that's a matching grant program, and generally neighborhoods will ask for some portion of this. Maybe if they raise $10,000 or $20,000 for park playground equipment replacement, then we do a grant, also from part of this $60,000.
Okay, thank you.
Member Blasey.
I guess I have a concern about this current motion because my understanding is there's some ongoing fundraising going on to leverage some SPIF grants. And, for example, the garden, and I could be totally wrong here, but I think, like the community garden that we've heard so much about would be impacted by this motion. So I don't think that I could support this.
Could we get an answer?
Yes, Mr. Bechtel, to you, I think we just recently did the grants for the SPIF projects. Oh, and Mr. Keever's here as well.
Mark Bechtel again. We have awarded the grants for the current fiscal year. And so those monies are essentially encumbered on promises for matching grants. We have not awarded the future funds for fiscal year 12-13.
Member Tesler.
Thank you. I'm not going to be supporting this motion at the time. I cannot, SPIF grants are too valuable for playground equipment, and we cannot replace playground equipment out of the budget. And many neighborhood associations use those grants to leverage other funds, and so I can't support that motion.
Member Dane?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I would withdraw the previous motion with
Second
the concurrence
agrees.
of the
Who's
second,
your
which I think
second?
was Clem for discussion purposes.
Would you? Okay, Mayor agrees. So withdraw that.
And instead, I would make an amendment to the amendment on the floor that the FTE be increased to the equivalent of only the communication fund dollars, so it would not be 0.5 FTE, it would probably be closer to 0.3
It's
something.
0.3.
0.3?
It would be 0.3.
Okay. Second on that?
Second.
McVilly seconds. Okay.
It's
Must
just
be
to
two.
keep it inside of that budget area, similar to what we've been playing with before, rather than take TOT dollars.
Member Williams.
Thank you. Question on the process or the authority. If this does not pass, this motion does not pass, can the neighborhood association go to the city manager, to staff, and request giving up communication funds, and the staff can make a decision to retain an employee? Is that within the authority of staff, or is that something that has to be done here?
Well, we don't increase staff without coming to the budget committee at the budget time or to city council if it's during the year.
Anybody else? Member Clem?
Yeah, I'm just now getting the gist of the budget impact here, so I apologize for asking earlier to the maker of the motion. To the substitute motion, I can't support it. I'll wait till we get to the main motion before, or main amendment before I make it.
Okay. Member Berger?
I support the substitute motion, Member Nankin's motion. I don't like taking tot funds that a group is dedicated for a specific purpose and using it for neighborhood associations. I don't think that was what it's meant for, and I think that will slowly erode the credibility of the tot funds, and over time, that fund will start to shrink, and support for those dollars will shrink over time dramatically if we start using a little bit here, a little bit there for other things.
Thank you. Member Tesler?
Well, I feel like we're going to be making sushi here pretty soon. We're going to fillet this finer and finer and finer. So I'm not going to support this. I cannot fragment. I'm a lumper, not a splitter, and I can't fragment this any farther than it has been. And I think that there are some areas within TOT that can fully afford giving up $18,000.
Thank you. Okay, we have a substitute motion on the floor. Is everyone familiar with it?
Can you restate that? Yes, please restate.
Okay, go ahead.
The motion was essentially an amendment to the motion that is amendment to the main motion. So it's the second amendment to modify the previous amendment to reduce the allocation in regards to TOT and instead increase FTE by 0.3 based solely on the communication dollars.
Okay, everyone's, yes, Member Bailey.
May I ask a question of the?
Sure.
So that's just for the TOT funds?
That would remove the TOT funds as a funding source for the FTE, which would leave only the communications dollars, which would be an increase in 0.3 FTE, not 0.5.
It would be reallocating the money that's in the proposed budget for this area.
Communications.
So we'd just be moving communication money to personal services, but there wouldn't be any addition to the budget as proposed.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes. Mr. McGill.
I mean, I'm just doing the math, but if we were going to restore one full-time equivalent, this would be a $75,000 a year employee, including fringe?
I believe so, yes. PERS, health insurance, this house.
Is that a motion? What are you?
No, I was just,
Oh, okay.
I just was doing the math to make sure that one full-time equivalent in this area would be $75,000 cost.
Total cost.
So we can't, right, with the fringe and everything, but we couldn't do a full-time equivalent for 50, and that's why I'm kind of leaning towards, let's take the 24.8, spend that on whatever we can get out of it for a person, because it just seems 37,000 for a half equivalent seems kind of high to me.
These are 2 employees who are at the top pay step in their range. They're already here, so it would be adding some additional hours back to those 2 employees.
Okay, so if we don't add
their
hours
pay
back
rate's
to
already
these
set.
employees, are their hours being reduced? These are employees
Yes.
whose hours are being
We're
reduced?
being reduced, so it would be restored
Okay.
to some extent.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Oops, sorry, Mayor.
Sorry to be slow here. I would like to make a comment that I noticed that we actually received, if I'm correct, we actually received emails or letters from 6 neighborhood associations urging us to not reduce this, this position or these positions. And I know that we have 19 neighborhood associations, and so I'm thinking there are 13 who don't think that this is a problem. And second comment I'd like to make is that, kind of following up on something that Councilor Dickey said, and that is that our neighborhood associations perhaps could begin thinking of some other way perhaps to be organized or to share resources so as to be able to continue doing the work that they're doing, the volunteer work that they're doing in the community, in their neighborhoods, by maybe combining forces somewhat. Some neighborhood associations are extremely strong and active, and others seem to be not so. And I'm thinking that trying to apply services and support equally to 19 neighborhood associations seems perhaps something that we'll need to look at down the line.
Thank you. Member Dickey.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that this has come up in the last couple of weeks, and so I know that there's been a lot of discussion among the neighborhood association chairs, but some of the neighborhood associations haven't met in the time that this has come up until we're here to discuss it tonight. And often, I mean, sometimes they can, they'll do a vote by email or whatever, but it really depends on their bylaws and how available the members are. So it's possible that some did not comment because they had not had an opportunity to discuss it with their board.
I'll also mention we have a meeting with the neighborhood chairs tomorrow afternoon, and I fully expect it to be discussed there. Member Blasey.
And I just wanted to add too, I did get some emails to my city email account that were from other chairs that are not, that aren't in this packet. So there were some other neighborhood associations. So I don't know that, it would be completely accurate to say that the others may not have a concern with this, because just from those emails and like you said, I don't, because they do this in a formal process, they would collectively formally address us, and they probably just haven't had a chance.
Okay, great. Member Strozit.
I would, excuse me, reiterate that the neighborhoods did not know about this reduction until the last few weeks. And I did send an email to all the neighborhood chairs asking, if you're forced to choose between your communications fund and restoring part of your staff, which would you choose? And those who responded all put staff as their highest priority. And Highland has not met, so we haven't voted on it, but the feedback I've got is all agreed with me that we need our staff, our volunteer coordinator essentially, to be a viable neighborhood association. You need someone to track those things at City Hall for you.
Member Clem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really trying to understand the net impact of this substitute motion, and that is, instead of funding, what it proposes to do is to take the proposal from $37,000 down to just the communications budget. That's the way I understand it. And I'm really trying to understand, before I vote on that, the impact of the main motion. On page 194, it takes 12.6 away, or it adds 12.6 there, and on page 195, it takes 12.6 away from there. So for my mind, the impact to TOT, the entire TOT budget is really negligible, and that it reduces the general fund to parks. So what we're really doing is we're putting $12,600 that would have normally been in parks and assigning that to the TOT fund. And if that's all we're doing to keep 19 neighborhood associations viable, I think it's a very, very small cost. We started out with how many neighborhood coordinators 8 years ago?
I was not here 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Ms. Witz?
6?
Do you know?
Darlene remembers.
Stroh's it was, yeah. Well, how many, Darlene?
It was actually even before my time, but it was 6.
Yeah, it was 6, and so what we've every year done is ask the neighborhoods to do more and more and more, and so they've done more. They've been innovative with email systems, with changes to their bylaws so that they could vote by email, and a variety of other things. And I would tell you that I can't support the substitute motion, although it's very near to what the main motion is, simply because we're talking about just a super small cost for a big benefit in keeping those neighborhood associations viable. So I'd like to, but I'm going to support the main motion.
Member Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on regards to the neighborhood association awareness. We talked about this before the turn of the year, and I'm assuming it came out in the budget forums as well.
No, we knew we were going to have some reductions in neighborhood services at that time, but it wasn't until right before, it was kind of at the last minute, that we realized that we still had to do some other reductions, and staff recommended this one. And so we had already done the budget forums, and so we talked about it in the budget message, I believe, is the first time.
Okay.
Or the general fund presentation.
Member Clausen.
Just to be clear, in this substitute motion, my understanding is that there's a net neutral on parks, because 12,600 is coming from TOT towards parks, but we're taking 12,600 from parks to the neighborhoods. But the substitute motion would basically, 12,600 would stay in grants from the TOT board versus taking $12,600 in grants. And if we want to take $12,600 in grants, I guarantee at our council public hearing, we're going to hear a lot of people on that one. I just want to be clear. $12,600 is coming out of grants by TOT. This substitute motion gets rid of that, so this $12,600 stay in the grants.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Substitute.
Substitute.
6.
Okay, all opposed? Okay, we're back to the main amendment. Further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Oh, did you want to say something?
Could you restate, please, before we
Oh,
vote?
sorry. Councilor Tesler, you want to restate your motion? Got it? Okay. Thank you. This is a motion that is written out so everyone can see it. So all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed?
4.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further motions?
13 to 4.
It must have been 5.
Amendments to.
Could we see the no hands again?
No, I abstained. I didn't vote.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Oh, one didn't vote, one abstained.
Okay. Chair has a motion. This really ought to be easy. On page 187, under the downtown parking fund, under downtown contracted services, parking management, annual update of parking resources, chair moves to move the budgeted $17,200 for that study to contingency.
Second.
The motion, I have mentioned this during the hearing, or the specific hearing on this budget. This is this would be the 6th year of parking studies downtown. The first 5 pretty much revealed the situation, and the situation has not changed. It's my contention the 6th year won't, the 7th year won't, but the contract can go on forever. And I think it's time to stop the studies. There is also in that budget parking management, community outreach task force. It's time to start doing that. It's time to start doing something about all these parking studies we've done. So I'd ask you to move that money and stop the studies on downtown parking.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Thank you. Told you it'd be easy. Any others?
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
Excuse me, Chair. On your last motion, because you didn't choose to reduce the cultural and tourism amount, I'm assuming the entire amount, the $12,600, will come from the grants, the other categories in the top budget? Okay.
Okay. Member Strozek?
Sorry, maybe out of order. There were 2 options that we didn't vote on which option within the culture and tourism. Isn't that correct? Yeah, okay.
That's
You voted on whatever she gave you in writing. Okay. That'd be the best reference at this point, I hope. Member McAvilly?
Okay. Obviously, we're getting close on the vote to recommend the budget.
Yes.
I don't know if this is the time, but it's got to be done before we vote, in my view.
Okay.
I thought when the police chief and the fire chief gave their presentations during the general fund discussion 2 weeks ago, that they were pretty good corporate soldiers and did a nice job. I'd actually, if it's not putting them on the spot, if they're not uncomfortable doing so, I would like to hear from each of them if they can give us a brief summary about what these cuts are going to really do to their departments. Have I inconvenienced you by asking either of you to kind of, I know you don't work for me, you work for them, but I'd really like, you guys did a good job on the corporate line, and if you're comfortable, I'd like to hear what you really think the impact of these cuts to each of your departments is going to be.
Are you asking, Mr. McAvilly, for essentially deviation from the testimony they gave? Because they have testified to impact.
No, I understand that, and so I'm giving them the opportunity if they are comfortable to do so. I don't want to put anybody in a spot, okay? Because I realize sometimes they have to put a public face on, but if these cuts are a little more draconian, please, okay? I think you've had a habit of this session. This is the one time I'm not going to let this happen, Mr. Chair, okay? I want to be heard and I want to finish, okay? If they are not comfortable in coming forward, I respect that.
Great.
Okay, but I just wondered if they wanted to come and add anything to their testimony of 2 weeks ago before we voted on the budget.
Thank you very much. We do have fire negotiations underway. I think that makes that one difficult under any circumstance. I would, this really is a point at which we're moving the budget. We've heard from them. If the chief wants to come down and make different, provide different testimony, not that chief, not the one negotiating. Where's the police chief if he wants to come down? Nope. Okay.
Right, and I just want to give them the opportunity was all, so thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're back to the amended main motion to pass the budget. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Got it?
Yes.
Okay.
It looked unanimous.
Any opposed? Okay, the budget passes unanimously.
I don't know that that was unanimous. Did everyone vote
Yep.
for the budget? Oh, all right,
Okay.
okay, all right. I thought I didn't see somebody's hand up, okay.
You want to point them out? We'll catch them on the film replay, all right?
I just wanted to be sure.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget for 2012-13.
So moved.
Dickey made motion, Tesler seconded. Any discussion on the urban renewal budget? Yes.
Yeah, and actually, as you read that, are we actually in item 10, which would be the ad valorem
Ad
property
valorem
taxes?
tax, I do apologize, I didn't finish it, did I? Dickey
As long
still
as
moves and
the
Tesler
maker
still.
reflects that change.
Any discussion on the ad valorem tax on the urban renewal district? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, Councilor Dickey, do you want to do the agency budget too? Okay.
I move to recommend the Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget for fiscal year 2012-13.
Second.
Second by Nanki. Any discussion? Chair has just a couple of points. On this one, I hope when the Urban Renewal Agency looks at the final budget, that we take a look at closing a couple of these urban renewal districts that are just not functioning correctly. And I'm looking I've got a couple, I'm sure other people have different ones, but I think there's a couple of them we need either a much better explanation as to why to keep them open and what the public good looks like at the outcome, and then another look at when I added up close to $300,000 in taxes this agency would receive, let alone the additional taxes that would accrue to other taxing districts like our public schools that are so seriously underfunded as well. So I will just mention, I don't think it's the Budget Committee's role to do that, but I want to mention that I think we got a problem going here with a couple of these. Okay? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Other business?
If I can just add one thing in for the year, was playing on my computer today, it's, my edification time, and looked at the national debt clock, which is always fascinating. I encourage people to go to nationaldebtclock.org. As a nation, we are currently $15.68 trillion in debt with a gross domestic product of $15.13 trillion. So our debt now exceeds our annual GDP. We have issues in Spain, Italy, Greece. Britain and Spain are both in recession again. North Korea is going to fire off a nuclear weapon, and hopefully it goes better than their missile test. We have issues with Iran. We have issues with fuel pricing. We have unfunded liabilities of $118.6 trillion at $1 million per taxpayer. So as far as how we're looking out in the front, it doesn't look rosy. Can't wait to do this again next year. Hopefully it looks better than what the winds may portray. Wow.
Whoa. Anyone else? Mr. Bailey?
Anybody else got any good news?
I don't want it to go someplace it doesn't belong.
Well, thank you. Actually, I think there is some good news, and that is that the city of Salem, we just are recommending a budget that is balanced for the coming year. And it was put together, I thought, very professionally, and despite some of the discussion and internal loop-de-loops we went through tonight, I thought that it was a really good process, and I was very impressed with all of the departments, the work they do, and the employees for the city really bear a lot of burden in this. Just to back up for a second, when I was on the city council in Oregon City, we closed a library and kept it closed. We closed parks and kept them closed. And we closed a neighborhood office and kept it closed. And I can tell you that the quality of engagement of the citizens deteriorated and changed because of that. And I'm really proud that we were able to pass a recommended budget to the council tonight that keeps the lights on and really, I think, over time is, in fact, part of this glide path to sustainability. And I want to thank the city manager and staff for doing this. And I know that the city council and the urban renewal agency may tweak this around the edges a little bit, but this is a really good process, and I appreciate everybody that came down to comment to us, because it did make a difference.
Thank you. Member McVille.
I said it last year again, we recommend the budget to you, the council, the mayor. What happens to the budget now really is in your hands. At some point, we all have to realize is that all the people from all the wards in the city of Salem elected you folks for a reason, because they have confidence in you. And so I think is trying to, I'm not speaking for the rest of the committee, but like last year, I have confidence that as elected officials, you guys know the best to do, and so wish you best of luck with taking what we gave you and making whatever needs to work. So thank you for what you guys do. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further? Member Dickey?
Thanks. And I actually was just going to thank the Citizen Budget Committee members because you guys put in a lot of hours as well. And I know, even tonight you've expressed you want to make sure that your voice is heard. And we do rely on your comments and your input into this. So thank you for giving up, I don't know how many hours and many evenings to do this, because it really is a service to the city.
Member Clem?
Yes, I completely concur with the previous comments, particularly that we are balanced, that we are moving forward, looking 3 years out. Particularly encouraged by the fact that even through all of the tough discussions that have happened tonight, we changed 1,000th of the recommended budget. 1,000th of the recommended budget. So keeping it in perspective, what was that all about? It's not the perspective I'm thinking of. It's really thanking the citizens who came down, who took the time to listen to all this and have more patience than we do, because once we start deliberating, the public hearing is closed and they don't get a chance to participate. But I am very, very thankful for the citizens who sent emails, came down and testified, and really for the citizens participating in the Budget Committee. I think this was, doesn't feel like it, but it was actually one of the better budget seasons for the Budget Committee, making the kind of tough decisions that we're making. This could have been a lot worse if we were changing more than 1,000th of the budget. So thank you very much to the folks who came down.
Any further? Member Strozen?
I certainly want to say here to all the thank yous, especially to staff and colleagues, but Salem has a great city staff, so I want to applaud them. And also our chair for keeping us reasonably well in line. It was a good process for very painful decisions, so thank you, Chair Bennett.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge Deborah Neville, her last budget, I'm told, which is hard to imagine for those of us who've been budgeteering for a while.
Yes, the word is out. I plan to retire at the end of July. So this is my last budget committee gathering. And I just have to say, even though the committee changes throughout, I've known a lot of you for quite some time, and it's been a pleasure serving you and helping you out in making your decisions. And budgeting is just in my heart. I love it, and I'll probably keep an eye on it from home.
Great.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that as we realized that we were going into this very, very difficult budgeting time, Deborah had actually planned to retire several months earlier, and I couldn't imagine doing this budget without her, and she agreed to stay. Excuse me. Thank you, Deborah.
Yay.
And it meant a lot to me. Thank you.
I'm glad I could help.
Great. Is there any other business then to come before the Budget Committee? Right. Without objection, then we're adjourned.
Get some sleep tonight, Linda.